week to our panel discussion. And with me, I'm Father Matthew Ragbeer from the Archdiocesan Family Life Commission. And joining me today, we have Suzanne Lashley. Welcome, Suzanne. We have Dwight and Christine Gonzalez. Welcome. And we have David and Suzanne Blah. Welcome.
Hi.
So it's really lovely to be here. And let's jump into our presentation. We have a wonderful program in store this evening on this day when we celebrate marriage and family. So I'm going to share my screen. You know, we're working within some limitations of we can't be in a studio because of the COVID realities. So I'm sharing my screen and we're going to start with our little trailer.
We are a family, a big family, a loving family.
Okay, so today we're reflecting on celebrating marriage and family. And our quote, especially for this panel discussion, is the welfare of the family is decisive for the future of the world and that of the church. And that's from Amoris Laetitia, The Joy of Love, this post-synodal apostolic exhortation that Pope Francis wrote. The welfare of the family. You know, one of beautiful writing here from Eliot, man, the person discovers himself after a storm. When the calm has descended on the outside, on the inside, the struggle rages on between what will we do now at the end of the storm? Do we assume the role of a dejected and nostalgic castaway, or of a crew member and part of a team that seeks to rebuild its destiny from the pieces that remain, and as much as possible to do so together? In other words, in the midst of all the storms, we're going to hear about some storms that are really affecting marriage and family life and the human person today. We have to choose, what are we going to be? Are we going to be part of the someone who feels it's all cast away and it's all broken down and we're complaining, or are we going to come together to rebuild something because God has something in store for us? What our journey this evening is going to take us through different perspectives on the family, some of the challenges, and then Catholic perspectives on marriage and the family. So our first thing, we're going to reflect a little bit on what images come to mind when we think of family. What memories come to mind? What realities really speak to us? And so I'm going to ask our panelists to share very briefly some image and memory, some reality about family that stands out for you. So let me go to our panelists. Yes, anyone can jump in.
Family for me, this is Suzanne here. Good evening, everyone. Both sides of my mother's and father's family is quite large. So family for me is huge. It's aunts, uncles, cousins. It is not just nuclear. It's not just mommy, daddy, and children. The aunts, uncles, cousins, nephews, nieces all play a very integral part. And pre-COVID, we made it mandatory that we would get together very often, share a meal and enjoy each other's company. So for me, that's what family is.
Thank you, Suzanne. Lovely, lovely experience there that you shared.
Yes, and for us, well, for me, when I just think about family, I think about children playing and a lot of laughter together with parents there and grandparents, just simply put.
Thank you, Christine. How many children and grandchildren you have, Christine? You and Dwight?
We have 9 children and 12 grandchildren.
Wow, wow. No wonder this is such an image for you all.
I think you invited 2 families with plenty people, with big families, big extended families.
Praise God.
Very aware, and I'm sure we'll get into it, that there are many other families that where people feel very alone and they're very small. So so we'll touch on that, you know.
So, okay. Anyone else?
My family was is still very big. My father's side was about 10 siblings. My mother's side was pretty small. But in addition to the actual blood relations, we had a lot of friends who became family. So we had many Christmases and birthday lines and festivities around particularly my grandparents' home, to celebrate those things. And quite often, those friends became family, like I said.
Wonderful, wonderful. So really rich experiences of family life that we are sharing here right now. Okay, now let me just jump back to our slide. Now, part of the reality that we have around family today is, let me just wait for this to come up. It's something where, as Suzanne shared, in our world today, people have, well, is it one family, is it two families? What kind of families do we have? And it's an important thing for us to reflect on, okay? What is the reality of the family we see around us? In Caribbean society, that reality quite often is around a single parent, and most often a single mom rather than a single dad, although there are single dads. And, you know, we did something with a single dad recently, and a father who's the single father called me and said, wow, you know, you all remembered us. So yes, we know it's not only single moms, okay? Then you have families where you have this sort of reconstituted, as some people, some sociologists call it, or you have a stepmom or stepdad or children from a previous relationship. You have persons who are in extended families. You have what is called a nuclear family, divorce, remarried, all sorts of things. And the question is, when we speak of in the church about families, what are we speaking about? But we're going to get to that a little later on. You know, Marshall McLuhan, in his famous text on media many years ago, wrote that the medium is a message. And I was reading something from the New York Times recently where this guy was reflecting on when he said the medium is a message. Look at the message that comes across in the medium of TV shows today around family life. One of the most famous TV shows over the last 10 years, The Modern Family, shows precisely this example of a kind of changing in types, and we have to ask, well, what does the church say in the midst of that? That TV series has a blended family, a nuclear family, and a same-sex couple that a same-sex couple. And they're all related, you know, they're all related. You have a patriarch, Jay, and then his children, etc. Okay? Merriam-Webster gives 8 different definitions for family. Oxford Learner's Dictionary gives 6 different definitions for family. So we're in a bit of a storm, and part of the challenge of today's world is there can be no rational moral agreement when we don't even agree on terms, and we don't agree on if we have no point of reference. How can we have any kind of discussion? And therefore, as Alistair McIntyre, a very famous Catholic philosopher, once said, you know, what are we really debating about if we don't agree on so many things? Some people don't even agree there's truth. Some people don't agree that words mean anything. So what do we mean by family? So it's important for us to enter in and look at where are we going with all of this, okay? The big argument sociologically is between, do we say families or do we say the family? Do we say families or do we say the family, okay? And when it comes to that argument, first of all, in terms of families and models and types, there's a transformation of structures and functions, transformation that has been observed and over the past 50, 60 years. So to speak about this, you could see this. In fact, BBC says you have a nuclear family, extended family, reconstituted or blended family, single parent family, and same-sex family. That's what BBC speaks of in terms of, for the British government, their standards of what family is. You also have under these models and types, more and more you have the sense of de facto unions or free unions or arrangements of choice. And this is where people say, well, you know, if we choose to live together and call ourselves family, guess what? We are family. And some years ago, there was a survey, and this was cited in Lola and in Rubio, and they asked people about what do you identify as family? This was the Americans. And they spoke of people who love and care for each other. Nothing about if you're married, nothing about, you know, having children. People who come together and love and care for each other, they saw that as family. So we have to ask ourselves, is that what family means to us? Now, in the transformation of structures and functions also, you have what is called in the development of feminism, especially sociologists who are feminists writing around this, like Thorne, who spoke about against rather the privileging of one type of family over another. She was very against the nuclear family, and writers in the church say, no, when we talk about family in church, we're not talking sociological, we're talking theological. Family is family, extended, mommy, daddy, children, granny, whoever, it's family. Okay, so just to keep that in mind from the beginning. But she struck out against the idea of this nuclear family, which has origin in this bourgeoisie kind of roots with patriarchal, idealized, middle class, etc. Another sociologist, Stacy, she wrote about that the working class families ushered in a new way of being family in the postmodern age, where you will have in a family ex-spouses, ex-in-laws, friends of the ex-spouses, and on it goes. Family. What is family? In our own Caribbean experience, there are many writers who have their books about the Caribbean family and the roles of the matriarchal society that we have, the role of the father, the way in which Afro-Caribbean experience of family differs from Indo in terms of practices, and other ethnicities within the Caribbean, they blend, and how the hybrid society, all sorts of things are written around that. Okay, so there's much that can be said around families. So that's just to give us an introduction, because this is, we don't have time to go through every single thing, but this is giving us an introduction. When it comes to the traditional family, what do they speak of? And a big part of that is the question, what distinguishes the family from any group of people who come together? And that's very important. What distinguishes the family from any group of people who just come together and say, well, we are family, Because in today's world, as we know, His Grace wrote about the gender ideology, a lot of that says when we feel something, we should identify as that, irregardless of our nature, irregardless of the truth of our being, our biology, etc. Well, the question is, what is specific about family, therefore? What is specific about family? One writer says, it's a heterosexual couple, parent-child relationship, socially recognized, that is sanctioned by a public, religious, or civil pact. Okay, that's by Sergio Bellardinelli. He taught me sociology. Now, we can also ask, there is a relational unity, as we go on to say, what specifies the family? Okay, one of the things that specifies the family here is a relational reality, that is uniting past and future through the present. So it's not just people coming together, he's saying. There's something about family that is a relational reality, uniting past and future through the present. In other words, the ancestors to their grandchildren through us. And so he calls for a deepening of why this word family? Because if we say that family could be anything, it might as well be nothing. And there's a truth to that. Words have a meaning. Okay? Relational sociology posits that what distinguishes the family is not a group of people being together, or material place, a space, a house, even though it takes form through these images and requires a spatial reference, a home. It's more than that. The family is the symbolic and structural relationship binding people together in a project intersecting the couple's relationship, so the husband and wife, that's the horizontal dimension, with the vertical dimension of descendants and ascendants. In other words, with one axis, the couple and their offspring being the other axis, the generations that flow. And you could see that the family is where it all connects. That's where Donati and these writers go to, that this is where it all connects. So there needs to be a reciprocity between the genders in the couple, legally formulated as a contract, and or reciprocity within the child-parent relationship. And they're both linked. And this is what I was sharing just now. In a sense, the family is the nexus between these two kinds of reciprocity, the sexual and the generational, whose link consists in the ethos of freely given to each other. So that's the spirit within the family. And the family, therefore, is what safeguards that space of the sexual and the generational, the horizontal and the vertical that happens there, that ensures the continuation of our species, as well as a space in which that the personalization of the human, etc., happens. We'll come to that very shortly. So the family consists of and requires a bond between the sexes. Okay, we kind of saw that. Okay, in spite of the great challenges in familiar forms, the criteria for the definition of the family remain distinctive as regards the ones used to identify other primary social units. So this Pierpaolo Donati is a very famous sociologist who writes a lot in what is called relational sociology. Here are some of the key texts in this and research. And he says, in spite of all the changes that people talk about in family, the criteria regarding family remains distinctive, and it can be applied as regards the ones used to identify other primary social units. They're connected by the fact that in continuity with the past, but differently from the past, the family still remains a place in which the prohibition to invert sexual roles and generational roles is enforced. In other words, when we see that intersection between the horizontal and the vertical, the couple and the ascendants and descendants, the family is a space that protects the right ordering of those relationships. And the family also has become that specific social relationship to which is increasingly entrusted the irreplaceable task of personalizing the person. And we're going to come to this later on. Beautiful writings from the church on the role of the family in helping us learn to love, becoming more and more who we are, growing up, maturing, learning to give the gift of ourselves. Okay, so let's have a short discussion around what struck you, what stood out for you as we just looking at family. When we speak about it, what is it about? There's a sociological reality. You also have a theological reality. Anyone?
So for me, it's about the continuity. It's not just a matter, as you said, of people coming together who care for each other, yes, but it's generational and it comes through time from ancestors all the way down. So that really stood out for me in terms of the definition of a family.
Thank you, Suzanne.
What stood out for me as well is that aspect of free giving. Because it was said to me a while ago, and it took me aback, that marriage and family is not for me. And when that was said to me, it took me aback. But what it really meant is that marriage and family is all about service. And it's not for that individual person, but it's that sense of giving and that exchange of giving that keeps the continuity that Suzanne is also talking about. You know, so that act of service between family, that reciprocation of giving is so important in terms of keeping that holistic value going forward all the time.
Thank you. And you know, shortly we're going to come to see some of the challenges, and there are a lot of challenges around that giving, because so many people feel, well, I have to preserve myself. You know, I can't. Gosh, you know, as somebody said, the Jumbian machine man. I had a plan, and you know, I feel like I have no time for myself anymore. Anyone else?
While I believe firmly in what the Catholic Church teaches, and I believe in marriage, and I see the sense of course, you connect to your bloodline. Part of the reality now is when you confront someone who tells you from the bottom of their heart that I'm shacking up with this person, my father died, my mother had nothing to do with me, she remarried and have her own family, and there's a real story. This person and these 3 dogs are the only people in my life, and that's my family. And how could somebody tell me that's not my family? That's who I come home to. And that's part of the reality we have to deal with and love and accept that person and somehow find a way to still explain our truth, which is the ultimate truth. But we have to, I think, somehow understand and work with where that person is at in their lives, but that's their truth and their reality.
Okay, thanks, Dwight. Christine, you're going to say something?
Oh yeah, I was just going to say the part that stood out for me was where, well, they talked about legal contract, and so I was thinking of more sacramental, though I didn't see that in the writings. And again, the same thing that person just mentioned about the progression from one generation to the next, and that whole bloodline, that also stood out for me. It's those two things.
There were two things that that struck me. One was I remember reading some years ago about I forgot the title of the book, but it was a community that was, I'm trying to remember if the guy was a priest. He might have been or not, probably a lay person, but he ran a community of mentally challenged people. And what emerged from that book for me was some of the principles that you spoke about in terms of that giving, that reciprocity, and the learnings that you have, that you obtain, not necessarily from somebody whose bloodline, but somebody who you have chosen to care for. You know, it's different in those kind of communities. And what I saw was at the end of the book, a family had emerged. They have different communities throughout France and blah, blah, blah. But so that was one. I just reflected on that setting. And the other thing was the socially recognizable definition that you had under Donati. I think the traditional family, it's socially recognized. What does that mean? You know, that social recognition of a family. And I think our challenges these days is that there are certain setups that we don't socially recognize, and whether that's a bit of judgment, not just from a religious aspect, but from a legal aspect, from a socio-economic aspect. What does that actually convert to in terms of socially recognized?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, the book you're talking about is Jean Vanier. The author is Jean Vanier, and the community is Lash. That's the community that he worked in with disabled persons all throughout Quebec and France itself. Okay, okay. A number of things. I'm just watching our time. So first of all, what I presented were different perspectives on the family. These are perspectives in sociology. So, Christine, your comment around the sacrament, we're coming to that just now, okay? The Catholic perspective on it. Now, the Catholic perspective is informed by a number of things, but parts of what that is too is, first of all, the Word of God that's revealed to us, and also our nature, and what nature reveals to us in our own bodies, the anthropology that becomes apparent through what we call natural law. So that's one thing. Sociologically, to tap into what Dwight spoke about, sociologically, and a bit of what Suzanne was speaking about, there are questions that you see, when we hear traditional family, one writer says quite often we almost, there's a pejorative sense, we almost see it as though it's something of the past, a nostalgia, or he says, or something that was so badly vandalized, and we have to say so long, but he said, that's why I started off with a quote from T.S. Eliot, that it's really what remains when all the fluff settles, and what remains when it settles is, and even in that sense, he's not even using the word nuclear, because nuclear has its own connotations, which is tied to this whole bourgeoisie and middle class and certain economic categories out of the 1950s, as Anthony Giddens, for instance, in Runaway World writes about. But what he's speaking about is there is something about the man and the woman coming together and the generations that are produced that is important for humanity, that we have codified as family. And that thing there deserves its own policies and legislations. One of the things that happened in post-World War society is that the family was presumed to be able to continue its strength and stuff like that, but it was more and more deconstructed by less and less institutional support. So it was emptied of its institutional meaning. So what is happening is you have a collapse happening from inside out. So that's why more and more in the midst of this wave that is saying, accept everything, you also have a wave that's emerging that's saying, but we need to protect this because this is where life is coming from. So from within the same circles, it's like something very ironic, which is modern society says, be an individual, unattached to anybody, successful, have your selfie, your selfie, and be able to travel. Well, COVID is preventing us from doing that. So be successful, unattached. They almost glamorize this life as no bondage, but it's really linkages of family, and you could go anywhere. But I was in part of a discussion when I was abroad studying, and the lecturer asked someone in that discussion, but tell me, to be that individual who is flourishing like that, who has a good education and is fit and strong and all these things, don't you need a good family to support you? Who taught you? Who would have walked with you? Who was cooking your food for you? Who was helping to provide for your education and for all your needs, helping to give you the skills that you have to be a functioning individual? And he got very quiet. And there was a reality about that where what it shows is, well, you can't have your cake and eat it, and to respond to, we do have to create ways of caring for people, and the state has that as part of what is the right of a state to care for all its people. But the question is, but what do we call it? Because words matter. And when you empty a word of its meaning, then the very institution it was meant to protect will fall apart. Okay? But there's much more discussion around this. We could spend hours speaking about this. So, I want to jump into some of the challenges, because that's to where we have to go. And again, we are coming from an approach that says we do have to respect people and respect people where they're at, and respect as well that we live in a world where there are so many. It's like us. I love the image of a boat. We're on a boat together, but on this boat, the air we breathe in. We get Sahara dust. So the air we breathe in is a little polluted. It's polluted with things that say, no, don't commit. Think only of numero uno. It's polluted with all sorts of things. And we're going to see some of those things. And the water splashing on us is polluted. The fish we getting from the ocean to eat has all sorts of things. And that's a culture around us that feeds so many things. There are many good things in it too. But here we are going to jump into the challenges that affect us. Okay, so we're going to jump into some of these challenges here. Okay, one of the things that has been seen, I was sharing about the post-war reality and World War II, that is, and more you have this progressive privatization of the family, where the private choice of the individual is what matters. Not society, or not, and so we have to understand, what did this lead to? So the family was no longer seen as a primary cell of society. That's what, one of the things we're going to see that the church says, primary cell of society. And there's a social capital. When you have good families, it helps, as it were, to create social capital. This, like, capital is, money that you have to spend, it's a relational capital, a social capital. It strengthens the bonds because in my family we're strong, with my neighbors we're strong, and so there's a strengthening there. Okay, with this privatization, there's the denial that it denies family the relevance of the family as a subject with its own right of intervention, and it marginalizes it from the area of public life at the social, political, cultural, and even educational level. So for instance, the lack of social support for families that has happened over time. Because when you flood it with anything and everything could be a family, then we can't, what are we protecting? And that's why words matter, definitions matter, and all these things, okay? So another example is in communication. The family has moved away, and it's no longer has a voice. So those who structure and make the films people see on Netflix and all this Disney or cable, etc., are not really concerned about family. They're concerned about making money. So the economics is what matters. The family is a bystander in something that affects it directly. We could look at how states decide matters around family, or for instance, the tendency, one writer says, that there has been to transfer the family functions to the welfare state more and more. Because the family is so weakened institutionally, most countries, one writer says, have decided to meet the family's needs simply by offering newer and more widespread public provisions. So you have full-time schools for leisure services. You have, so the state kind of takes over the functions of the family because the family itself is suffering a lack of identity, okay? And we have to be aware of these things. We have to be very, very aware of these things. We could go into policies and a lot of other things like that, okay? But we don't have time for all of that. Interestingly, when it comes to what will we defend around family, individuals and social categories, it's usually around gender and age and gender-based violence, so especially children, women, and elderly people. But what about the dignity of the family itself, the dignity of safeguarding procreation, the dignity of safeguarding the bond in marriages? That does lead to much heartache and lack of trust, to tremendous strife in our society. It's not one or the other. We have the dignity of the human person must be respected. And so these are some of the challenges that has happened. Some more challenges. With modernity came the movement of tremendous individualism, okay? And Bauman, who wrote about liquid modernity and liquid love, where he says people just move in and out of relationships. Nothing really matters as something that's firm. It's all fluid. It's all a fluid kind of reality. He characterized the time we're in by deregulation and privatization of tasks and duties. So he saw this happening a long time ago. So we have moved from an emphasis, one writer says, on a just society, to give an example, to one on human rights. So you see, it's an individualization, no longer at the level of society, it comes to the human rights, which has now been reduced to the rights of individuals to stay different and to pick and choose their own model for happiness and fitting in, etc. Okay, and that's from Bauman himself. We also have one of the challenges is this view of freedom indifferent to what is chosen, where people think, I am free once I could choose. It don't matter what I choose. I could choose once I'm free to do what I want, how I want, when I want. If I could jump off a building, then I'm free. But is that freedom? No. Actually, it could be self-annihilation. Freedom always has responsibilities. The values in the modern system in which Bauman, as a sociologist, wrote about are now speed, change, flux, and in that you could already get it, the way in which we are pragmatic and utilitarian, transience, and precariousness. As such, modernity cannot tolerate the family. It must liquefy or liquidate them because this thing is standing in the way. Okay. Last slide on some of the challenges, post-modernity. And what is brought is no objective truth. And here we come into the definitions. Well, that's what you mean. Well, that's not what I mean. Well, this is my truth and that's your truth. And all of a sudden, it's a never-ending circle of, well, what is true? We speak about post-truth and all today. The very words that people are using suggest that they believe there's something true about the very words they're using in terms of meaning. So, it almost falls on its face. We also emotive. By emotive, emotivism is a trend in philosophy, and it describes our age. And this was since the beginning of the 20th century, this was already flagged. If it feels good, then it is good for me. Utilitarian, if it's useful for me, then it is good. And these things affect the family. It affects how we think of love, of relationships. There's no question about what is really good for us. The departure from natural law and public discourse has also affected the way we approach sexuality in the family. The consumer culture, lifelong commitments. People see lifelong commitments as a burden, a real burden. Marriages have to be in and out at will, and don't put me down with no children and thing. Contraceptive mentality that separates sexuality from marriage and sexuality from procreation. And then, of course, the gender ideology that we've spoken about, and what that does in terms of the emotive reality. If I feel this, then this must be my identity, without reference to my own nature and what my own DNA and biology says. So all these things affect family in many, many ways. Okay, so we're going to pause and we're going to go for a little sharing. Here we are. So anyone? Comments?
Hi, so just from a younger perspective, I would add that, I think the aspect of stability in a family or a relationship is important, whether it be religious stability, financial, or just guidance in setting morals and rules, especially if you were an adult or the head of a household. The absence of that, it then comes back to what you just presented to us in terms of we look up to what we're taught in school, what we learn in church, or simply our households. So the absence of stability for a younger person is definitely dangerous.
Sure. Thanks for sharing that, Nicola, and welcome. Welcome. I didn't introduce you at first. Welcome. And one of the things around stability is, when is enough enough? That's one of the questions. But yes, and because of the kind of world we live in today, it is important to know that you have the means needed for survival, as well as the precarious nature that was spoken about, means that you have all sorts of things, from trust issues. People are looking for, well, there's a verification of love. Pope John Paul II said, as people enter into relationship, does this person really love me? And more, as we work with married, engaged couples, sometimes, couples are breaking up sometimes before the marriage. It's better when that happens, because they know they have to go and do some work. And sometimes within a month, 2 months, within the first year, we get calls, and you ask some people, what happened? What happened? And the suspicion around so many different things, questions around, and so it's a very valid point, and the lack of mentoring to help calm that heart. You have other couples here who could say, we made our journey. Listen, let me tell you our story, So it's a both, and it's an experience of hearing the other stories, and the fears of the heart have to be addressed. But thank you for sharing. Thank you. Anyone else? Challenges that affect family life?
Yeah, from my perspective in my household, I mean, there are so many things happening simultaneously. Everybody has their own agenda. So we have 3 kids. Well, they're not kids anymore. They're 22, 18, and 8. And everybody has their own agenda. Everybody has their own.
David, you're with us? I think we may have lost you for a second there. David is sharing about their family and everyone having their own agenda. Okay. Anyone wants to jump in the meanwhile? Okay, David, you're back with that.
Yeah, apologies. I'm having some internet issues. You all hearing me now?
Yes. Go ahead. Yes.
Okay, great. Apologies. Yes. So what I was saying is that so many things happening simultaneously at the home. So when in fact is family time? What really creates that family at the end of the day is really coming back together at some point in time, no matter your age, no matter what it is, you know. And I think through this pandemic and through COVID, one of the advantages that we have, and
I think we're losing David again. Okay.
So, Father, should I jump in now?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, in our family,
it has allowed us to now have that time. I mean,
David, we lost you again, you know. We lost.
Yeah, go ahead. You can move on. I'm going to switch devices and see if that helps. Right? You could move on. Apologies.
Sure.
Right. So, Father, the thing is, from the time I was having my second child, we made a decision. I'm going to leave my job. Because how can I look after my children? Not everybody could make that decision, but we knew it would have been less financial help we had. We didn't. So when we moved in, we had no cupboards. By that time, we moved into our house. We had 5 children, no cupboards. And Dwight said, well, that's okay. We could use some boxes. But I almost went into a deep depression with that one, right? But the point is, finances were an issue. But I have to say that the church helped me. The priests, every time we had a meeting with the priests, they would say, Christine, is everything okay? I'll say, boy, Father, you know, have this child now starting, I don't know, kindergarten. He'll say, call me, because there are people in the parish should give me money and I am free to do what I want with it. Another time, if we had situations with children needing to do sports and I said they need to do something extra, the church was walking with me, both of us, every step of the way. And I know people say lots of bad things, and it's probably true about things with the church, but I have to say in our walk, as besides the church in terms of priesthood, the marriage movements in the church have been great support. When I didn't know what to do, when I was mad with Dwight and I would go to these other married women and say, what you do when so-and-so's the situation? They would laugh, but they would all tell me, this is what you do, this is what you have. When we meet with other couples once a month in our teams, those are the questions or the things we talked about. Those are the things that help me to know what is the truth and to understand it and accept it. So, Father.
Thank you very much. Susan, you wanted to share something? Oh, sorry, Susan Lashley. I'm looking up in Susan's direction, but obviously she doesn't have the same screen that I have. So either Susan, because we need to jump back in. We have about 12 more, 12 more minutes. So anyone will go ahead?
Bobby, you can go ahead.
Okay, great. So in the midst of all that we experience, the Holy Father says to us, Pope Francis says, in every situation that presents itself, the church is conscious. The church is conscious of the need to offer a word of truth and hope. And those two things have to be understood. A need to offer a word of truth and hope. And that truth, of course, is bringing people into relationship with Christ, but it's also truth about who we are, and so many of the things, when we move away from truth, a lot goes off, okay? As Christians, Pope Francis says, and people may be surprised at this, but he says, we can't stop advocating for marriage simply to avoid countering contemporary sensibilities. You have to be so politically correct, or out of a desire to be fashionable, or a sense of helplessness in the face of human and moral failings. Yes, there are broken relationships. Yes, things happen, but we have to keep before us the invitation from God. We would be depriving the world of values that we can and must offer. What we need is a more responsible and generous effort to present the reasons and motivations for choosing marriage and the family. And in this way, to help men and women better respond to that grace God offers them, trusting in God's grace. You see, quite often we think we have to do it all by our own strength. And we throw God out. And that's part of the secular milieu that we're in and the way in which it affects all of us. Okay, so Pope Francis and Pope John Paul II spoke about the gospel, that family life is good news. Family life is good news. And that no matter where, whatever's happening in our experience of family, the strength of the family lies in its capacity to love and to teach how to love, because it could always begin with love. The great values of marriage in a Christian family, they correspond to a yearning that's part and parcel of the human existence. So we move from this sociological kind of reality to one that's more theological, meaning God has something he wants to say to us about love. And he has said it in Christ about marriage, about family. God comes to us in a family. That says a lot. God chooses to come to us in a family. You know, all kinds of things come to us in family, but God comes to us too in family. We must remember that when we want to say, oh gosh, these people, you know, we have to remember God comes to us through the family too. Okay? Pope Francis said marriage is the most beautiful thing God created. God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. That is to say, as John Paul II wrote, the man and the woman who become one flesh, they image God. That we're not the image of God only in our individual nature, our solitude is the correct word there, but he created them male and female. In the image of God, he created them. That the union of the differences there in a man and woman is an image of God who is a communion of persons. It's love. So we want to watch this short video and just take a look on the beauty of marriage. The beauty of marriage. This is Many Voices, One Promise. It's on YouTube from Humanum Etche Films, or Etche.
هنگامی که اولین داستان عشقم رو شنیدم شروع به جستجویت کردم غافل از این که چقدر ناقص بود عاشقان در پایان به وصال نمی‌رسند
آنان همه وقت در هم درگیرند ここに万物の完成体を受け入れ完全なる生命の存在の証を誓います
互いの違いを愛しみ私はあなたとなり
またあなたも私となります
ومن آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها وجعل بينكم مودة ورحمة إن لباس لكم
وأنتم لباس لهن
प्यार और दोस्ती अब अविभाज्य और मजबूत हो गए हैं मैं अपने आप को तुम्हें समर्पित करता हूँ
विधाता मैं आपकी पत्नी बन गई हूँ मैं आपसे हमेशा प्यार करूँगी
Είδωσιν ιούς των ιών αυτών, ως νεόφυτα ελαιών κύκλο της τραπέζης αυτών.
Την κήτην αυτών ανεπιβούλευτον διατήρησον, υπερτουριστήν αυτούς και ημάς από πάσης λήψεως, οργής, κινδύνου και ανάγκης.
Του Κυρίου δεηθόμεν.
Dlatego opuści człowiek ojca swego i matkę i przyłączy się do żony swojej i będą dwoje jednym ciałem.
Tajemnica to wielka jest, lecz ja mówię o Chrystusie i o Kościele.
me see your face. Let me hear your voice. For your voice is sweet, and your face is lovely.
The beams of our house are cedars, our rafters cypresses.
Me has robado el corazón, hermana y novia mía. Me has robado el corazón con una sola mirada de tus ojos.
I belong to my lover. His yearning is for me.
Wow, just wow, just wow. Now we just have about, time has flown, we have about 4 minutes. I'm just going to give some closing remarks, and I'm going to invite each and every one of you to share something as well. Sisters and brothers, for us as Christians, at the heart of family is marriage. And no matter what our reality is, in the midst of our brokenness, in the midst of all of that, there is a treasure that the Pope is inviting us to see, that we must safeguard for the future generations, because it is in this space that God invites us to know He's at work. And beyond that, that in the sacrament of marriage, that's a sign of God's own love for us, as we saw, that in their love, it is pointing to the big love that Christ has laid down His life for all of humanity. That's, it's this covenant between baptized persons raised to the dignity of the sacrament by Christ our Lord to a sacrament. And so, cherish marriage, value marriage, protect it, defend it, pray for couples struggling, defend family life, because this is the future of our world, of humanity, and the church that passes through that. Anyone? We are now wrapping up comments. So anyone? Let's get a comment from each person.
Yeah, what really stood out to me is the nostalgia of that video. The beauty of it, the early signs of marriage and being in love. But what we have to remember too is that love is a decision and love is a commitment. Because we are married 23 years. And a lot of our friends who got married later on, they ask us, how did we do it? And it is really a sense of commitment. It's not a, as older people say, it's not a bed of roses, And love is really a decision. It's a commitment. Marriage is a commitment. And marriage is a union of service. And without that service, it cannot last. Yeah.
Thank you, David. Anyone else? Our final comments. We have about 1.5 minutes again.
I'd just like to say quickly that I'd just like to encourage anyone listening. The world has lost its way. It's shocking to the extent that it has lost its way. The church, with all its imperfections, still carries the truth. And there's only one truth, which is God and the Word of God. So I encourage anybody to, with all their might, submit themselves to God, because therein lies the truth. There's no other truth.
And to add to that, I look at marriage and married couples as commandos. We are the front runners in the army. So for all of us to keep the faith and keep strong, and for anyone considering marriage, go for it. The best thing out.
Thank you, Dwight and Christine. Suzanne?
Just a note from the video. God has given us everything that we need to persevere in making family life really joyful and what He intended it to be in terms of His sacrificial love for us. So the graces are there. It's really about trying to tap into it and be available to it.
Thanks for sharing that. Sometimes people just don't ask for help,
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
quickly add that this is specifically for the younger generation, as well as, you know, just kids who are probably looking on, that marriage is so much more than just two people in a relationship, more than just two persons put on the earth to procreate. You know, it's a sacrament and definitely should be treated as such, which I know is hard to do because we get so distracted by worldly things. But to all the married couples that set an amazing example of what it is and what it's supposed to be, I hope that, you know, we can see more of it from other couples, soon to be married couples. It's wonderful to see. So yes.
Praise God. Praise God. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very, very much. And I'm going to go into our outro. God's blessings upon each and every person. Family life is messy. Marriage is messy, but we're not alone. Christ has come to redeem us, and he offers us a new path through his grace. And we're meant to help and support each other. So let's indeed fight for marriage and family, pray and support each other. God bless. And I'm going to put on our outro now.
We are a family, a big family, a loving family.